Here's a question most people over 50 have never been asked. Which glute is weaker, your left or your right? If you don't know the answer, that's exactly the problem. Because there is a weaker side, there almost always is. And every time you do squats, bridges, or leg press, both legs working together, your stronger glute quietly covers for the weaker one. It feels balanced. It isn't. And that hidden imbalance is behind more pain, more flatness, and more frustrating plateaus than almost anything else.
This is so frustrating.
Today, we fix that. 3 exercises that address 95% of weak glute problems after 50. Not a full program, just the ones that actually work. We actually have a clinical name for this because, of course we do. It's called gluteal inhibition. The muscle is there, it's healthy, but the signal telling it to fire has gone quiet. Usually, from years of sitting, repetitive movement patterns, and I say this with great professional humility, doing the exercises we recommended without anyone checking whether the right muscles were actually doing the work. We told people to squat. We told them to do bridges. We handed them a list. What we didn't always do is ask, is the glute actually firing, or is something else picking up the slack? Stay with me through the second exercise, because there's one move in this video that most trainers never give to women over 50, and it's the one that actually changes the shape of the hips. Not just the size, the shape. So here's what's actually going on, and why fixing it is more specific than most people realize. The first thing that happens when your glutes go quiet is that they literally forget how to fire. Not permanently, but after years of sitting, the neural signal between your brain and your glutes gets quieter and quieter. In rehab and fitness circles, it's sometimes called glute amnesia, and once you've heard the term, you'll never forget it. The muscle doesn't disappear, it just stops showing up for work. The second thing, most people have only ever trained one glute muscle out of 3. The gluteus maximus, the largest one, in the back, gets all the squats, all the bridges, all the attention. But there are 2 others running along the side of the hip, the medius and the minimus. For most people over 50, these 2 are barely touched. And the third thing is the sneakiest of all. When both legs work together, your stronger side quietly covers for the weaker one. It feels balanced. It isn't. And over time, that imbalance compounds. 1 exercise for each. Let's go. Exercise 1. Prone hip extension. The first exercise isn't glamorous. There's no equipment, no movement pattern to master, no burn to chase. But if your glutes have been quiet for a while, and most people's have, this is where the conversation starts again. This is the prone hip extension. And the reason it works when squats and bridges haven't is the position itself. When you're lying face down, the hip flexors, the muscles that dominate most glute exercises and quietly take over when the glute doesn't show up, are fully lengthened and out of the picture. There's no body weight to distribute, no stronger muscle to compensate. The glute has to do the work, or nothing moves. What we're doing here isn't building strength yet. We're restoring the signal, re-establishing the conversation between the brain and the muscle. In clinical settings, this kind of isolated activation work is often the first step before any loaded glute training, precisely because without it, the load just goes somewhere else. Think of it less as exercise and more as reaching out to a muscle that's been ignored for a long time. It's worth the patience. Here's how to do it. Lie face down, legs straight, forehead resting on your hands. Before you move anything, draw your belly button gently toward your spine. Not a hard brace, just a soft engagement. That's your foundation. From there, squeeze one glute, just one, and lift that leg 2 to 3 inches off the floor. Hold for 2 seconds. Lower slowly. That's 1 rep, 10 reps per side. Then switch. What you're feeling for is the glute contracting before the leg moves. Not the hamstring, not the lower back. The glute. If you don't feel it right away, that's okay. That's exactly why you're here. For a harder version, add a 2-second hold at the top. For an easier version, place a folded towel under your hip for comfort and reduce the lift to just clearing the floor. Small movement and the beginning of something your glutes haven't felt in a while. Exercise 2. Clamshell. Remember what we promised earlier? A move that changes the shape of the hips, not just the size? This is it. Meet the clamshell. And before you dismiss it for looking too simple, the gluteus medius, the muscle this exercise targets directly, is the reason some people have a rounded, stable hip and others don't. It runs along the side. It doesn't get much attention. And after 50, it's almost always the weakest of the three glutes. In clinical practice, the gluteus medius is probably the most consistently undertrained muscle I see in adults over 50. Nobody posts about it. Nobody brags about their medius gains at dinner. It doesn't show up in workout montages. And yet, here we are. Because this quiet, unglamorous muscle running along the side of your hip is largely responsible for keeping you upright when you're on one leg, walking, climbing stairs, catching yourself when you stumble. That's gluteus medius. For women after menopause, especially, it tends to lose both mass and activation speed faster than the others. For men over 50, the gap is just as real. The medius simply never gets trained because nobody ever told them to. So yes, the exercise looks like something you do while watching television. That is not a reason to skip it. Here's how to do it. Lie on your side, hips stacked, knees bent to about 45 degrees. Draw your belly button gently toward your spine, core on, body stable. Keep your feet together and rotate your top knee upward, like a clamshell opening. Go as high as you can without your pelvis rolling back. Hold 1 second at the top, lower with control. 15 reps per side, then switch. What you're not doing, letting the hip roll backward to get more range. Less range, right muscle. More range, wrong muscle. For a harder version, place a light resistance band just above the knees. For easier, reduce the range to whatever keeps the pelvis still. Here's the thing about that shakier side you might have noticed during the clamshell. There's an exercise that makes it impossible to hide. Exercise 3. Single leg glute bridge. Now we take everything we've just woken up and make it honest. The single leg glute bridge. Same position as a regular bridge, one small change. One foot stays off the floor. That's it. And that small change reveals everything. Because here's what bilateral training, both legs working together, has been hiding for years. One side is almost certainly stronger than the other. Not slightly, often noticeably. Your dominant glute has been quietly doing the heavy lifting while the other side came along for the ride. This is the exercise where people find out. Asymmetry in glute strength is remarkably common in adults over 50, and most people have no idea it's there. Because when both legs are working together, the stronger side simply compensates. It feels balanced. It isn't. What concerns us clinically is that this hidden imbalance often shows up elsewhere, as knee pain on one side, hip discomfort, lower back issues that seem to move around. The single leg bridge doesn't just build strength, it exposes the gap so you can actually close it. And for most people, finding that gap is the moment things start to change. Here's how. Lie on your back, knees bent, feet flat on the floor. Draw your belly button gently toward your spine. Lift one foot just clear the floor and press through the heel of the grounded foot to raise your hips. Hold 2 seconds at the top. Lower slowly. The lifted leg stays still the whole time. 10 reps, then switch sides. What you're listening for is the difference. Does one side feel shakier? Does one hip want to drop? That's information. That's exactly what this exercise is for. For easier, keep both feet down, but shift 80% of the weight to one side. For harder, extend the lifted leg straight out while you press up. 3 exercises, 3 reasons. That's the 95%. Not because the other 5% doesn't exist, but because most people never even get here. Most people are still doing the same squats, wondering why nothing changes. You now know something different. Give these 3 movements 4 weeks, then check in with the side that felt shakier today.